In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that the person in custody must, prior to interrogation, be clearly informed that he has the right to remain silent and that anything he says will be used against him in court. He must also be clearly informed that he has the right to consult with a lawyer and to have the lawyer with him during interrogation, and that if he is indigent, a lawyer will be appointed to represent him. On January 22, 1973, the court ruled its decision with a 7-2 majority vote in favor of Roe. The court ruled abortion is a fundamental right under the Constitution, thereby subjecting all laws attempting to restrict it to the standard of strict scrutiny. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that the burning of the U.S. flag is protected under the First Amendment. In a 6-3 ruling, the court decided that executing mentally retarded individuals violates the Eighth Amendment. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court held that it is unconstitutional to impose capital punishment for crimes committed while under the age of 18. In a 7-2 majority vote, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Duncan, arguing that the right to a jury trial in criminal cases was fundamental and central to the American conception of justice. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that due to the Establishment Clause that separates church and state, public schools may not even use non-denominational prayers at school-related functions or events. In 1939, the Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment does not guarantee an individual the right to keep and bear a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun because this weapon does not have a reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled in favor of the school, saying that the students have some expectation of privacy, but must be balanced with maintaining a safe learning environment for other students. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court held that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court held that because the policy reasonably serves the school district's important interest in detecting and preventing drug use, it is constitutional to drug test students participating in extracurricular activities. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court found that requiring reporters to disclose confidential information did not violate the First Amendment. In a 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court held that it was consistent with the Constitution to require state courts to appoint attorneys for defendants who could not afford to retain counsel on their own. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court upheld the decision by the school, saying that reasonable physical discipline does not violate the Constitution. In a 6-1 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that the reading of a non-denominational prayer at the start of the school day did in fact violate the Establishment of Religion Clause of the First Amendment. In a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that students and teachers don't lose their constitutional rights of speaking or expressing themselves freely. However, they do have a limitation to it because they still have to keep order at school. In a 7-0 ruling, the Supreme Court found that the relationship among the club's members was not of the intimate or private variety which warrants First Amendment protection. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court declared that all evidence obtained by searches and seizures in the violation of the Constitution is inadmissible in a state court. Therefore, Map was acquitted of all crimes she was convicted of. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court held that no constitutional recount could be fashioned in the time remaining in the election. In a 6-2 decision, the warrantless search and seizure of Greenwood's garbage does not violate the Fourth Amendment's search and seizure guarantee. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that Escobedo had not been adequately informed of his constitutional right to remain silent, so therefore was acquitted of all charges. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Vernonia School District, saying that students who voluntarily participate in school athletics have reason to expect intrusions upon normal rights and privileges, including privacy. Therefore, drug tests for all extracurricular activities are constitutional. In a unanimous 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court held that the First Amendment did protect the publication of all statements, even false ones, except when statements are made with actual malice. In a 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that the segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race did deprive the minority children of the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. In a 7-2 ruling, the Supreme Court held that the death penalty was a grossly disproportionate punishment for the crime of rape, because rape did not involve the taking of another human life. In a 5-4 ruling in favor of Citizens United, the Supreme Court held that under the First Amendment, corporate funding of independent political broadcasts in candidate elections cannot be limited. In a 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court held that marrying someone of a different race was protected under the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. In a 9-0 ruling in favor of the United States, Schenck was found to not be protected by the Free Speech Clause of the First Amendment, and he was charged with conspiracy to violate the Espionage Act. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court found that the accused's right to a jury trial does not require that the juries return unanimous decisions in order to convict the accused individual. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court held that while Congress has broad lawmaking authority under the Commerce Clause, the power was limited and did not extend so far from commerce as to authorize the regulation of the carrying of handguns.